My wife cheated on me. Now she wants to come back, but I'm no longer the same man. I never thought I'd write something like this on the internet, but maybe it'll help someone avoid my mistakes. Or at least make someone understand that life can change so suddenly, you can hardly believe it's happening to you. I'm 32 years old. We'd been married for 7 years. We started dating back in college. You know, the kind of story where you feel like you found your person forever. We weren't the perfect couple, but we were stable, laughter, future plans, occasional arguments, but nothing serious. I truly believed she was my person. She was always beautiful, smart, with a strong character. There was something about her that drew me in. I was just an ordinary guy, not rich, not a bodybuilder, but I tried. I worked, I carried the weight of the family, I did everything so we'd have a future. And the scariest part of this whole story is, I really thought we had one. But everything collapsed in a single day. It was a regular evening. I stayed late at work and got home around 10. The apartment was quiet, though usually she would greet me with something. Dinner's on the stove. How was your day? Or just laughter from the room while watching a show. But that night it was silent. I went into the bedroom and saw her phone on the nightstand. Normally she never left it unattended. I don't know what made me check it. Maybe intuition. Maybe exhaustion and a need for reassurance. But I picked it up, unlocked it, I knew the password, and opened her messages. I wasn't looking for anything specific, but I found it right away. A chat with Dennis. At first, just emojis, neutral texts. Then more personal. And the further I scrolled, the more my world crumbled. Photos. Lines like "I miss you. That night was the best." I sat on the bed just staring at the screen. I didn't feel rage. There was no shouting, no urge to smash things. There was silence inside me, the kind that's scarier than any scream. When she came home, I was already sitting in the kitchen. She immediately realized something was wrong. I put the phone in front of her. She turned pale, tried to say something, but I raised my hand. "Don't. Just tell me how long this has been going on." And she told me. 6 months. For 6 months, I lived with someone who came home to me after being with another man. For 6 months, I thought everything was fine, while she split herself between 2 lives. I don't remember the whole conversation. I only remember that at some point she started crying, begging for forgiveness, saying it was a mistake, that she was confused. But in that moment, I only heard one thing: I betrayed you. I left that night. Just walked out of the apartment and drove with no destination. In the car, I screamed until my voice gave out. I hit the steering wheel until my hands hurt. I cried like a child. And the scariest part, I had no idea what to do next. The first few weeks were hell. I didn't eat, barely slept. At work, I sat like an empty shell. Colleagues asked what was wrong, but I just waved them off. I didn't go home. I rented a cheap room on the outskirts and just lay on the bed staring at the ceiling. You know what was most humiliating? I still wanted to go back. Despite all the pain, despite reading her messages, I caught myself thinking, maybe I should forgive. Maybe it really was a mistake. I hated myself for that. There were moments I wanted to end it all, just to stop the pain. But every time something inside me held me back. Maybe fear. Maybe a tiny spark of hope that I could still change something. And that's when I realized one thing. Either I sink completely, or I change. The first month after the betrayal felt like living in hell on earth. I honestly felt like I was losing myself. I stopped recognizing the face in the mirror. I fell into a pit of self-pity, hatred, and emptiness. One night, I was sitting in that rented room, with peeling walls and a bed that creaked like it might collapse at the slightest movement. Just drinking cheap beer. I turned on my phone, mindlessly scrolling through my feed, when I suddenly stumbled upon a picture of myself from 2 years ago. I was at the seaside with my wife. I was laughing, tanned, alive. I looked at that photo and realized that man was dead. And then something inside me snapped. I threw the phone at the wall, grabbed my head, and for the first time in a long while, I screamed. But it wasn't a scream of pain, it was a scream of anger. Not at her. At myself. At the fact that I had allowed myself to be destroyed. That night, I made a decision. Either I stayed this half-dead nobody, or I was going to be reborn. And if I was meant to live on, then I'd become a man I had never been before. The next day I woke up early, with no plan, no real idea. But I put on my old sneakers and went out for a run. I barely made it a kilometer before I nearly collapsed. My lungs burned, my legs trembled, my heart was pounding out of my chest. I stood on the street bent over, spitting bitterness. People walked past, some laughing. But I didn't care. I had taken the first step. I started running every day. At first a kilometer, then 2, then 3. It was brutal. I cursed myself, but I kept going. I didn't want to stop, because I knew if I stopped, I'd fall back into that pit. At the same time, I signed up at the gym. The first workouts were torture. I looked at the guys benching plates and felt like a small, weak nobody. But I didn't quit. I did what I could. I lifted the empty bar, pedaled on the stationary bike, worked with my own body weight. And here's the amazing thing. Every single day, the pain inside me got just a little bit smaller. The physical exhaustion outweighed the mental one. I'd come home and finally fall asleep without thoughts gnawing at me. But the gym was only part of it. I realized my life couldn't revolve around the thought she cheated on me. I had to build something new. I started reading books. At first motivational ones, then psychology, business. I devoured them one after another. I began to feel curious about life again. At work, I stopped being the gray, faceless office clerk. I started taking initiative, pitching ideas, arguing, proving my point. Management noticed. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could grow not just physically, but professionally too. I made new connections. At first just colleagues, then new friends at the gym. People who knew nothing about my pain. And that was even better, because I could just be myself without the label of the guy who got betrayed. 6 months passed. I had lost almost 15 kilos. My body had completely changed. I surprised myself when I looked in the mirror. For the first time in years, I wanted to live. At work, I got a raise. I started leading a small team. That gave me confidence. And the most important thing, I stopped thinking about her 24/7. Sure, sometimes memories broke through. Sometimes I even dreamed we were together again. But now it didn't break me. I had learned to take the hit. And just when I was really beginning to taste this new life, she showed up again. At first, it was likes on my photos on social media. Then comments, "You've changed so much, I'm proud of you." I ignored them. Then came the messages. At first neutral, "How are you? Haven't seen you in a while." I didn't reply. But inside, something still twitched, like an old scar aching when the weather changes. And then she wrote, "I want to meet and talk." I stared at that message for 20 minutes. My heart was pounding. But I replied, "Okay." We met at a cafe. I walked in, saw her, and felt something strange. She was the same, yet already different. She looked at me with eyes full of regret. "You've changed so much," she said. "I don't even know how to approach you." I stayed silent. I know I messed up. I understand now. I want it all back. I want us back. And in that moment, I realized I had truly changed. Because before, I would have thrown myself at her, forgiven her, just to feel her presence again. But now, I looked at her and said, "You're right. I did change. But I changed in a way that you're no longer part of my life." She cried. People turned to look. But I felt calm. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. I walked out of that cafe and breathed deeply. I realized I was free. Not from her, but from my past self. From that weak, dependent man who was willing to endure betrayal for scraps of attention. Now I had a new life. And in it, there was no room for those who had betrayed me. After that meeting at the cafe, I walked home and, for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was moving forward, not backward. There was a sense of victory, not over her, but over myself. I survived. I didn't break. People often say, the best cure for a broken heart is time. Bullshit. The cure is working on yourself. Time heals nothing if you don't move. I learned that the hard way. My life began to change faster than I could even process. At work, they entrusted me with a new project. I led a team of 5 people. Before, I would have been trembling from the responsibility, but now I felt the drive. Every day was a challenge, and I thrived on meeting it. I enrolled in project management courses, improved my English. In the gym, I was confidently lifting weights that once seemed impossible. Even my face had changed, sharper, tougher. And you know what's ironic? Women started noticing me. At work, in the gym, even just on the street. I caught glances, heard comments like, "You look great today." At first, I felt awkward, but then I realized it was natural. I had become a different man, and the world began reflecting that back to me. Meanwhile, she didn't give up. She kept writing. Long confessions, short hi messages. At first, I read them in silence. Then I stopped opening them at all. One day she showed up at my office. She was standing outside, waiting. I walked out, and she tried to talk. She said she realized I was the only one, that she'd made a terrible mistake, that the other guy had dumped her, and she understood she had lost what was most valuable. I looked at her and knew, once, those words would have cut me to pieces. Once, I would have fallen at her feet and forgiven everything. But now, I told her, "You made your choice. I'm not your backup plan anymore." She broke down crying right there outside the office. My coworkers saw it, and yeah, it was a little awkward. But inside, I was calm. After that, I pushed even further. I realized there's no ceiling in life unless you set it yourself. I started building plans that once seemed like fantasy, opening my own business, traveling more, earning enough to never count pennies again. I began surrounding myself with new people who were also moving forward. Conversations with them lifted me to a new level. In those talks, there was no whining about how life sucks. There were ideas, plans, ambitions. And at some point, I caught myself thinking, I didn't think about her at all anymore, as if she had never existed. And if I did remember, it wasn't with pain, it was with cold indifference. But she moved into another phase. First, requests. Then, begging. She called me at night, messaged me from fake accounts, even showed up at my parents' place. Told them she loved me and wanted me back. My mom asked, "Maybe you should think about it." I answered firmly, "No." And that no wasn't out of anger. It came from the understanding that I could never again be the man who could love her the way I once did. Respect and trust, that's the foundation. And ours was destroyed. Soon, another woman entered my life. I won't go into details, but I'll say this, it was honest, pure, and new. She didn't know my whole story, and that was perfect. To her, I wasn't the guy who got betrayed. I was the man I had become now. When my ex found out, she caused a scene. She messaged my new partner, tried to paint me as a monster, saying things like, "He's unrecognizable now, he's cold." But all that did was show how lost she was in her own lies. A year passed since the day I discovered her betrayal. I was sitting in my new apartment with a glass of wine, thinking about the path I had walked. Was it painful? Hell yes. But was it worth it? Absolutely. I had become stronger, more confident, wiser. I had rebuilt a new life from scratch. And now I understood. Sometimes you have to die inside in order to be reborn. And her. She remained in the past. In my past, a place I will never return to. Almost a year had passed since that meeting in the cafe, where she first tried to win me back. Since then, my life had moved so far forward that I could hardly believe I was once that guy sitting in a shabby room with cheap beer, hating myself. Now I had my own apartment, a new job that brought not only money, but also respect. I surrounded myself with people who were striving to grow. I had goals, dreams, and an energy I had never felt before. And it was at that moment that she showed up again. She wrote a long letter, not a message in a messenger app, a real letter, handwritten. She left it with my parents. I opened it in the evening. It had everything, apologies, confessions, regrets. She wrote that life without me was empty, that she realized everything too late. That Dennis, the man for whom she destroyed our marriage, had long since left her, and now she lived in loneliness, unable to find her place. "You've become the man I always admired," she wrote. "I want to be by your side again. I'm ready to start over. Please, give me a chance." I read those lines and felt nothing. No pain, no joy, no anger, just emptiness. As if the letter was written not to me, but to the man who no longer existed. A week later, we ran into each other at a shopping mall. She approached me herself. She looked tired, her eyes red, hair messy. That confidence that once drove me crazy was gone from her face. "Can we talk?" she asked. We sat on a bench in the park nearby. She started again. "I understand now. I regret so much. I want us back." Her voice trembled. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I listened silently. And only then I said, "You don't want me back. You want back the man you betrayed. But he's gone." She looked at me as if she didn't understand. Indifferent, I continued. "You killed the guy who was willing to tolerate, to believe without proof, to live in an illusion. And this new man doesn't need you." She covered her face with her hands and began to sob. I stood up. "You made your choice," I said. "I've made mine." And I walked away. After that meeting, I walked down the street feeling light, as if the weight had finally lifted from my shoulders. A year ago, I thought her betrayal had destroyed my life. In reality, it was my rebirth. If she hadn't cheated, I would have remained that weak man who lived only for someone else's comfort. But now I was different, stronger, smarter, more confident. And you know what? In that moment, for the first time, I genuinely thanked her. Not in words, but inside myself. Because her betrayal had been my salvation. People are often afraid of endings. They think betrayal, divorce, loss, it's a period. But really, it's just a comma. A chance to start a new paragraph in your life. I realized we cling too tightly to the past that destroys us. We hold on to those who betrayed us because we're afraid of being alone. But it's in solitude that we truly find ourselves. Now I know one thing: never let someone else's mistakes define your worth. Never let someone's betrayal break your future. Because, in the end, it's your life. And only you decide who you'll become after the hit. Today, when I look in the mirror, I see a man I'm proud of. A man I would respect myself. And that, to me, is the most important thing. And she's still in my past. In a story I once lived and closed. And if someone were to ask me whether I regret how things turned out, no. Because without that pain, I would never have become who I am today. And maybe that's the true meaning of betrayal. It destroys us so that we can rebuild ourselves anew.